Hey everybody, welcome to Kent with Bent number 125, the Kentrix Reloaded. Because,
Yeah.
why be creative when I could just name it after the sequel to the previous one? You know,
I never guess what next week's episode's called.
yeah, there's no way you'll guess. If you guess, then you will win at least 40 internets.
Ooh,
Yeah, it's pretty good.
that's good.
Yeah, that is. So, Bent, how are you today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing all right. I got a video uploaded for early access for all those patrons and channel members and people like that. So,
Nice.
yeah, no, I'm gonna double check what it's actually called so I can tell you about it in case you want to go, I don't know, sign up for one of those things that gives you early access.
That's a
Imagine
good
that.
idea.
I know, right? Yeah, so today I finished up a video called What is Science? It's first part of a series featuring Dr. Jennifer Hall of Answers in Genesis, where basically she struggles mightily to describe science in any kind of way that makes sense. And I would
Mm.
say that ultimately she fails. So there's that. Yeah, it's a 50-minute and 35-second video. And just a little bit after 27 minutes in, I go on a nice long list of historical events for reasons that will make sense if you watch the video. So it's a fun
Mhm.
list, though. It includes
Yeah,
vampires. Well, actually, it highlights the lack of vampires during a certain event. But it's an event that involved Transylvania, so you got to mention whether or not there's vampires anytime Transylvania comes up. That's just a fact of life. Sam Suborbital Platypus Talbert, member for 13 months at the amnio level, says AIG is a sack of pant pendulums. There we go. I got it right. Thank you very much. We'll take a drink for that. All right, so let's get into the drinking rules since we just had one trigger. First of all, if you send anything to the effect that AIG is a bag of dicks, we will take a drink. You do have to be a little bit clever about that, though, because YouTube will censor it if you just type in that they're a bag of dicks. Yeah, YouTube kind of sucks that way. Anyway, we will also take a drink if Kent Hovind says something that's too stupid, if he says something that's correct, but he's not just quoting someone, that it's actually coming out of his brain, down his recurrent laryngeal nerve, back up to his, voice box, and then up into his vocal apparatus, and he flaps his lips and moves his tongue and vibrates his vocal cords to say the smart thing. Take a drink. We do tend to get a little generous as the night wears on, though. Olivia Williams, remember for 19 months, says, "Oh, got one of those. Let's go." And that is a membership that she's mentioning, and with a Ghidorah emoji. So we'll take a drink for that because if you super chat or milestone chat, and you are a member of the channel, you have access to all the channel emojis, which include 3 kaiju emojis. We got Mothra, Godzilla, and King Ghidorah. If you use one of them, we take a drink. Oh, right. If Kent tells a story that didn't happen, or he tells a joke that doesn't land, we'll take a drink. If Kent Hovind mentions that group of people that would normally be doing things like triggering Godwin's law, causing you to lose an argument on the internet, we'll take a drink for that. Nope, it's not a drink for Godwin's law, because he brings them up far more than he actually violates Godwin's law, which he doesn't always do. He actually doesn't do it terribly often. Fits of Rage for $2 and their 20th super chat. Thank you very much, Fits of Rage. Says, next episode, Kentrix Revelation. With a Godzilla, you'll just have to wait and find out. But, you might have won some internets. I don't know. Where was I? Oh, right. Predictions. If Bent or I can successfully predict Kent's next point, we will take a drink if we get it right. Of course, I already said that by saying successfully. You know what? Redundant. It's redundancy. That's a feature, not a bug. It's important in case one of the words breaks down. That's what's going on there. We will also take a drink if Kent uses a Trojan source. Now, what a Trojan source is when you cite a source, and rather than that source either supporting you or just not supporting you, it actively argues against your point. We take a drink for that. We will also take a drink for ad hominid, which means if Kent Hovind confuses the specimen Lucy for the source of all knowledge about any wider taxon, we take a drink. So, for instance, if Kent says, well, you don't know if Lucy was a knucklewalker because Lucy didn't have feet. Well, guess what? Her species had feet, and we have many of their foot bones. We will also take a drink for each gifted membership. So if you look over over below chat, there should be a little currency symbol. I see it as dollars, but I don't know if people in other countries see it as dollars. In fact, actually tell me, if you are in a country that uses a symbol for your money that is not the dollar sign, let me know if the little square that says show your support for Dapper Dinosaur has a dollar sign or if it has your local currency, because I would be curious to know. Like, tag me, tell me what your local currency is, and tell me what symbol it shows, because I'm very curious about that. Anyway, but if you click on that, in addition to Super Chat, there is a gift membership. Gifted memberships are pretty cool. I think they're a great way to support the channel, because not only do they support the channel, they also give benefits to other people who receive them for free past what beyond you paying for them. So they get I believe it's a 30-day membership. It automatically, goes away after 30 days. It doesn't cost them any money. And all that happens is when it goes away, the next time they are on YouTube, I think on one of my videos, it'll say something like, oh, hey, your membership has expired. Do you want to renew it? Yes, no. Hit yes. Well, then you have to put in payment. Hit no, it just goes away, and that's it. It's very simple. And while you're there, while you have it, you have access to the Discord server. You have access to early access videos, all the stuff that a regular member would get at that level, which is the $5 level, in case you're wondering. So there you go. And there we go. Zero One just gifted 1 Dapper Dinosaur membership to help us demonstrate, and we will take a drink for that membership. It went to Shazammy Whammy. There you go. Congratulations, Shazammy Whammy. Also, if you give more than 30, we just finish the drink and go get another one. We're not going to stand here and count out 50 sips of whatever I'm drinking, which in this case is whiskey and cola. What are you drinking there, Bent?
Oh, I'm drinking some nighttime coffee. And then I have some iced tea with some strawberry lemonade flavor in it.
Okay. It's like a strawberry Arnold Palmer.
It is good. It is.
Okay.
I like it.
Now, have I forgotten any of our drink triggers?
Yes, if the kaiju monsters come by audibly.
That is a good point. Yes, if that happens, we will drink.
We will take a drink.
Before we start, I want to give a word of warning, which is to say, hey, if you decide to play along, and you decide to play along with an intoxicating substance, first, please know your limits, be safe, moderate how much a drink is for you, right? I'm not taking a shot when we say we're drinking, right? I'm taking a sip of whiskey and cola. It's already mixed down from that. There's ice melting into it. I'm not sitting here drinking a glass of 40 proof whiskey here. So please be careful. Now, if you are using something that's intoxicating in any way, please know your limits. Don't go and do anything stupid. Don't drive a car. Don't operate heavy machinery. Don't text your ex. All of these are bad ideas. Just don't do it. That being said, please do have fun. And if you want to play along with something else like water, tea, Arnold Palmer's, vape pens, water, go for it. Those are all fine options. That being said, the Dapper Dino channel does not accept any liability or culpability for what you get up to after getting too much intoxication into you and going out and doing something stupid. Now, Royalin, who's been a member for 19 months and is at the tetrapod level, says Godzilla, Kent, Get Bent, and an AIG is a bag of dicks. All of those being membership emojis. So there you go. Baba Ali says, I'm going to go skydiving, lol, YOLO. Look, if you go skydiving and someone else packs your chute and you're not packing it while you're drunk, and maybe you go with someone else doing a pandem jump, maybe, but I still don't recommend it. All right, I think that pretty much sums up everything we have to say before we dive into this. Now, I want to give you a little bit of context in case you weren't here last time, or I don't know, maybe you don't have last week's episode fresh in your brain. Kent Hovind is talking about how scientists, according to him, like to go on and on about the evidence for microevolution because they don't have any evidence for not just macroevolution, but all the other things he thinks are evolution, none of which are evolution. They're just other parts of science he doesn't like, but he doesn't want to have to say that, so he pretends that they're all the same part of science, which is really what's going on, right? Because if he just said, well, I just don't like most of science, but I really love science, well, that would be a pretty big red flag. So instead he's like, well, I like science, but I just don't like evolution. We're like, well, that's just one theory. Maybe he does love science. And then you realize, oh, what he means by evolution is just most of science. Yeah, okay, got it. Diamanters and Gojiro Wing, member for 17 months and is at the amnio level, says, get bent, bent. I get you, Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, and an AIG is a bag of dicks. So, take a drink. All right, with that being said, I think the only last one is, if you are someone who enjoys the Power Rangers after shows where we go to the Discord and watch Power Rangers, the plan is to watch 4 more episodes of Lightspeed Rescue tonight. So,
Yay.
there you go. And while we do that, I may or may not work on animation for the something I'm going to premiere on early access in hopefully a week or two. Don't want to give too much more away, but requires more animation work. So, without further ado, here is the man, the myth, I don't know, the horror story with an actual body count, Kentrix.
And they keep focusing on examples from macroevolution because they want to draw the attention away from the fact that there is no evidence for any of the rest of them.
I mean, I'm not going to put on the full yodeling segment here, but if you're a member of if you've been around the channel for a little while, you'll be familiar with my transitional fossil slideshow with the yodeling, which is one of my favorite set of examples. But like, so let's see, macroevolution, which is just speciation and above. I mean, we've seen species form in real time, so we got that covered. Let's see, planetary formation. Well, one, we have a lot of physics that supports it. All sorts of physics simulations, physics calculations work out. And also, interestingly enough, things like isotope ratios actually work out well with this planetary formation system, where things like lighter isotopes seem to be a little bit more common out in the outer solar system. Also, nearby things that tend to have formed from the same cloud tend to have the same isotope ratios, whereas we look out into the universe, in areas where we can measure isotope ratios, they seem to be a little bit different, indicating that the Earth and the solar system did kind of coalesce from a single cloud. The solar system formation thing explains why there's an asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, right? It's like part of the protoplanetary disk. I can talk. That was sort of like trying to form a planet, but the interaction with the Sun, Mars, and Jupiter tended to make it so that those clumps couldn't all form together. That's also why we have little dips in asteroid density as you go out. They're at little harmonic areas where different orbits between Jupiter and like Mars line up in certain numerical ratios that help clear that area of bodies. Like all of this stuff, right? It all fits together neatly, makes predictions, predicts the existence of things like the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud, and no matter what creationists will tell you, we have seen objects in the Kuiper Belt, like, Pluto. Everyone's heard of Pluto. Yeah, that's a Kuiper Belt object. So let's see. Above that, he's got nucleosynthesis, which, I mean, we know how nucleosynthesis works. We can see some of it in just regular old stars like the sun, but also supernovas, right? Also, like various different types of supernovas, like supernova type 1A supernovas, where you get a bunch of mass that accretes onto a neutron star until it builds up enough pressure and just kind of explodes off. That's actually where we get a lot of the heaviest elements that are naturally occurring. Like, we can observe that happening in the debris field of actual supernovae, because we can look and check for, like, emission spectra of various atoms, and then just look at them and say, oh, hey, look, there's a bunch of heavy elements there, whereas there weren't before. And then, of course, he's got the Big Bang, which has numerous amounts of information or lines of evidence, the biggest of which is just, the universe is currently expanding. If you wind that backwards, it all collapses into a point. So what are your other options? What would stop it from running backwards? And of course, there's things like the cosmic microwave, background radiation, things like that. So yeah, there's actually a lot of evidence for the other kinds of evolution, most of which, again, aren't evolution.
They're all pure religion.
Just take a drink for that. Just do it.
He calls it a religion just because he doesn't agree with it.
I also want to point out the reason that Bent is wearing a tutu today is because we hit a fundraising goal last week. If we hit the fundraising goal for the tutu this week, he will wear a tutu again on the next Kent with Bent, which should be the first Tuesday of next month, right?
I think so.
Okay. And if we double it, then I will wear a tutu in my human suit with that human suit on camera next week.
Instead of me.
And he will be freed from that obligation.
Because there's only one tutu. to go around.
Well, if I do it next week, it wouldn't matter. You could still wear it the next show.
That's true.
Yeah. Van Donnelly, 1998 for $5 says planetary evolution is when the planet's kids each have different mutations that might let them survive better out in space and lets them have kids. Yeah. That would actually be planetary evolution if planets could reproduce and have like variable heritability. I can't talk today. What is happening to me? Yeah. I don't know why I just drank. So there you go. There's a free drink.
Yay.
I get all sorts of letters and phone calls and emails from folks that are upset with me because I try to include the other 5 in with evolution theory.
You mean other than macroevolution, the ones that aren't evolution, Kent?
Yeah, I wonder why they're upset.
Yeah, it's almost like if you went around complaining about the theory of universal gravitation, and one of your complaints was that you didn't believe in germs. And someone's like, okay, but germs aren't really part of the theory of universal gravitation. And you're like, oh, are you saying that germs don't have mass and therefore don't exert a gravitational pull according to your theory of evolution or gravity? And someone's like, well, no, but that's not that's not really how science works. And he's like, sounds like you're just in denial. Yeah, that's roughly what's happening here.
And they'll say, well, evolution doesn't deal with the origin of life.
That's true. It does not. I forgot that was one of the ones. Yeah, it doesn't, right? Evolution deals with populations of reproducing organisms. Until you get there, you don't have evolution, which means that until after life starts, evolutionary theory does not apply. Ian Chen, official, says, Daps and Bent, can we get too much of a good thing? Would a stuttering Daps say the stream today is on a Tuesday? I might actually say that it's on a Tuesday, although I suspect it's actually a Wednesday over there off in, the land down under. Because that was for $7.99 redues, in case I wasn't clear about that. Which, of course, is what the official currency of Australia should be called, instead of the Australian dollar, which is lame. In fact, I don't know how any of this works, but if I were Australian, I would demand a constitutional referendum to rename the dollaridoo.
Evolution doesn't deal with the Big Bang. Okay, if that's really what you mean, then why don't you help me get that stuff out of the textbooks?
Things aren't in the textbooks, Kent, because they're evolution. They're in the textbook because they're well evidenced. People are telling you that you're having an error in your categorization of science. I'm taking a drink for this. This is really, really dumb, and it's hurting my head.
Dumb.
So there's two problems that someone could have, right? One is, hey, Kent, you're wrong because you are miscategorizing things that are not evolution as evolution. A second problem could be, Kenthoven, you are wrong because the things that you say are unevidenced are in fact very, very well evidenced. Okay, those are separate complaints, right? And I happen to make both complaints. So if your response to, hey, if you think this isn't evolution, why don't you help me get it out of the textbook? That doesn't make any sense. Because I still accept the science. I'm not a science denialist, who maybe should be being held liable for some, I don't know, alleged, wrongful death resulting from gross negligence. I don't know, something like that. Maybe. Which, by the way, that kind of thing is generally not covered by liability waivers, which Kenthoven makes everyone sign before they come on the property. Yeah, accidental death, even if it's in the liability waiver, usually isn't actually covered if you cover it in court, which means I hope at some point that those parents pull their heads out of their own colons and sue the crap out of Kent. Not that they'll ever recover, because he's already got multiple judgments against people working for him. They're not paying. I don't think he will either. DM answers in Gojira Wing says, people call me out on my BS, but non sequitur. Yeah, no, that is what that comes down to. Ian Chen official for $7.99 reduce says, dollar reduced? It's behavior like this why we keep sending you Americans are stupid. No, not dollar reduced, dollar redo. Come on, man. You like Ken Ham so much we sent Martin Isles to you also. Oh my goodness. Yeah, in case you don't know, Ken Ham has a new acting CEO, or not acting, he has a new like operations CEO or something. It's basically the real CEO, and Ken Ham is the founding CEO, which just means he's an old man who's retiring, but will show up at work every once in a while to see what's going on. Yeah, it's like when Grandpa decides that it's time for your dad to take over the business, and he's the new owner. But every once in a while, he just comes in to just kind of like order employees around. And they're like, "Oh yes, sir, yeah." And then they go away, and then they just go back to whatever they were doing because everyone knows he's not actually in charge anymore. But they don't want to be rude to him because he founded the company, and your dad still likes him. That's what Ken Ham is doing. He's the grandpa in that situation. So, and yes, of course, Martin Isles is in fact an outside hire. Sorry there, Emery Moyna, who's what's his real name? Something the third.
I don't know.
Whatever. I'll remember it later.
Remember.
I know you were. I'm sure it's a big disappointment. But that's okay. At least you scrubbed all those borderline terroristic threats off of Rumble.
See, they don't want to help get it out of the textbooks. They like it in there because it kind of helps, foster what they believe. But it's certainly...
Imagine that. People who accept evolution believe more than just evolution. They also believe the rest of science. Wow.
Not part
That's
of science.
crazy talk.
Okay, the textbooks teach 20 billion years ago there was a big bang where nothing exploded and produced everything.
All right. So by this point, he should have updated to probably closer to 15 billion. I'm not sure that 14.8 was like a number that was being widely promulgated by the time he made this, so I'm not going to harp on it too bad. But the thing is, he to this day says 18 to 20 billion years old. And the thing is that that's based on older, less precise data, and we have better, more precise data. Now, I'm not going to super get into the crisis in cosmology. I don't understand it that well. I don't know, Bent, if you want to get into it, we can. If you can explain it, because I probably can't. But basically, yeah, there are some contradictions in this. But Kent likes to complain about changes to this estimate as if that weren't how science is supposed to work, right? As if science always got their measurements exactly precise to an infinite level of precision with no inaccuracies. But sorry, that's just not how the world works. So anyway, just want to point out that he is still going with the 18 to 20 billion every once, and yeah, then he just complains when people say, "Oh, hey, that number is no longer really a reasonable estimate, and we've got more precise measures." Yeah, he just complains about that.
And then about 4.6 billion years ago, the Earth cooled down.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Developed a hard rocky crust, and it rained on the rocks for millions of years and turned them into soup.
Notice how when he says it turned him into soup, that's not something he's actually getting from the Hult Earth science or anything like that. That's because it's his interpretation. Because he is still stuck in like the 1950s when the primordial soup idea was still like a really big thing. We've since moved on to things like, hypercycles and RNA world near things like hydrothermal vents and things like that. But hey, who cares, right? It doesn't sound as ridiculous as turn them into soup, because remember, Kent has to strawman science in order to attack it, because if he actually had to deal with real science, he couldn't. Because not only is it well evidenced, he doesn't understand it, because Kent Hovind, in addition to being a very, very disgusting person, is also an utterly, utterly stupid person. He has no original thoughts. He has no ability to understand anything that he's talking about. He's even confused by just the basics of things. Oh, hey, we'll drink from Mothra. So there we go. Like, remember, in my debate with him, despite me telling him several times that the topic of the debate did not require any argument for or against evolution, and that I would not be arguing for evolution, he still tried to bring it back to evolution several times, after which every single time I said, well, that's irrelevant because I'm not arguing for evolution today, so I'm going to ignore it. Yeah, his smooth brain, head empty, only thoughts are basically misogyny with like some homophobia and transphobia sprinkled in, and then also, how do I grift money? Those are the thoughts that go on in that smooth brain of his. Oh, I forgot, there's some racism in there too. Like, remember that time he had a Native American woman on and he asked her how many people she'd scalped?
Yeah,
Yeah, I
it's
remember
not
that.
okay.
Not great.
The textbook says, as the earth formed, the surface was hot like the moon, and there were large pools of bubbling lava, and then it rained on the rocks and formed the oceans. And
Also, I want to say it didn't say it was hot like the moon. It said that the surface may have been basalt like the moon, because the moon's surface is primarily basaltic. Just put that out there.
swirling in the waters of the oceans is a bubbling broth of complex chemicals, this textbook says. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. Well, I guess it is. It's totally stopped. Doesn't happen at all. But
I'm going to go with it. That was a joke that didn't land since it had the cadence of a joke. I don't think I actually got anyone who tagged me to let me know whether or not the super chat button is $1 in their country if they are in a country that uses some other symbol. So I am still curious about that. If you are in a country that does not use the $ as a symbol for your currency, please tag me and let me know like what the currency you use is and what it looks like when you use the super chat button. So, because I would be curious.
they believe non-living material came alive about 3 billion years ago. This
Yeah, that's pretty close.
textbook says the first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. Now here we have systems that are able to replicate, in other words, reproduce themselves.
Mm-hmm. Now, interestingly enough, we already have non-living systems that can replicate themselves, that can form spontaneously under prebiotically relevant conditions. Those systems are, in fact, relatively short chains of RNA, which can spontaneously form in areas where you have like RNA nucleotides and whatnot, and ribose and things like that. We know ribose can form spontaneously. We know it can even form spontaneously in space, because ribose was detected in the interior of an asteroid. So, like, ribose formation is not on its own a problem. We know that RNA formation on its own is not a problem. And we know that the formation of chains of RNA that can then go on to reproduce is also not a problem. So, reproduction almost certainly came before life. So, the reproduction part, not a barrier. Now, later life got much, much more complicated reproductive systems, right? Like, you know, Bent, as a mammal, I can assure you, your reproductive system is much more complicated than a short chain of RNA making copies of itself.
Very much so.
Yeah. But your reproductive system is also not, like, very comparable to the first reproductive systems on Earth, as you might be surprised to learn. Also, let's see, we've got Fear Dinomorphosis Monger says, yes, it is indeed a $. And there the currency is the Swedish kroner. Baba Ali says it is the $. Also, Baba Ali, should I be putting a voice pharyngeal fricative before your first name? Is it actually highly? Because I'll do it if you want me to. My unfinished intro says for $2, is EM's real name Harry Anderson? No, I don't think so. That doesn't sound right. He's got articles on AIG, and he's got something he has something the third, I think, right? I don't remember what it is, and it annoys me because I usually do remember.
And they say, well, it must have emerged. You got to watch that word emerged. It occurs all through the textbooks.
It just means that something came about without something outside of the system it's in causing it to intentionally, right? It just kind of springs up, right? Like, plants emerge from the soil. It's because people didn't, like, shove them up through the soil, right? It emerged from the soil.
It means nothing.
That's dumb. Let's take a drink. Generally speaking, words don't mean nothing. I'm curious, Kent, what word you would prefer that the textbooks use from the standpoint of believing that evolution is true, right? Because that would be the word that you would be okay with them using given their beliefs, which, granted, you don't share, but it would at least be a reasonable word choice, right? Let's see. Command Cyborg says, who's been a member for 33 months, let me point out, and is at the amnio level, says, remember to like and such good people, I did, and I'm generally considered, at least by myself, a pretty stand-up guy with a Godzilla and an AIG as a bag of dicks emoji, so we'll take a drink for that. Harry F. Sanders III. My unfinished intro. That's it. Harry F. Sanders III. Thank you very much. Yes, that is in fact it. Thank you. I knew once someone said something like it, I'd be like, yep, got it. Oh, right. Let's go ahead and hit play. That is the next thing.
They'll say, man emerged on the African continent. What do you mean, emerged?
In that case, it means that the species Homo sapiens evolved from among a group of other hominins in Africa, like 300,000 years ago. That's what that means. It's just that saying that whole thing is kind of long. Sorry, Kent.
Oozed out of a rock or something?
No. It means that they evolved from within a group of hominins. That's actually pretty easy to understand.
He's just being intentionally stupid.
Yeah, you know what? He's being intentionally stupid enough for me to take a drink.
He really is.
Okay.
How did this happen? That's not science to say self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. That is meaningless.
No, see, first, there was no life. Everyone agrees about that, even creationists. Then later there was life. In between, life emerged. Exactly how isn't clear to anyone, although we do have good options for how it may have happened that need further research. On the other hand, Kent Hovind's options are physically precluded by the evidence and would violate numerous laws of physics, which means even if he were right, science couldn't ever figure that out because science isn't allowed to just say, well, maybe it was magic, because magic has no predictive power, and that means you can't test it, which means you cannot provide empirical evidence for it. All right. Oh, and Baba Ali says it's just an online tag, not my real name, so say it as you like. Okay.
So they teach, life appeared in the rocks from the soup about 3 billion years ago. And I oftentimes, they'll say, do you think all the dogs could come from 2 dogs on Noah's Ark?
Which, by the way, they could not, right? So we know things like the current genetic diversity of canids, which is what Kent means when he says dogs. And we know that it's much too high to be combined into 2 individuals on the Ark only 4,400 years ago. And further, we know that even if we allow for mutation accumulation, it's still far too many. You would need mutations to fix at a rate of more than 1 a year. And they really just can't. Maybe in the first few generations you could get a rate like that just because of how small the population is. But once you have a population that's of any size, it's even minimally viable. Mutations just aren't going to fix at that rate. So no, it's physically impossible for that to have happened. And we can tell that because we can empirically test things like substitution rates in canids, because we have genomes of fossil and subfossil canids to test against, which means, including actual dogs, like domesticated dogs, right? Like we have ancient dog genomes. We can test how fast their substitution rate is, which is the rate at which mutations take over in a part of a population and become fixed in that subpopulation. Every time that happens, that is a substitution. You've substituted one allele for another. Since we can measure that empirically, we know that we cannot get that much diversity out of 2 canids on the Ark to get us to modern canines. And remember, you don't actually have 4,400 years to do that, because we know that there was differentiation in canids that was essentially the same as today in ancient times, because we have writings about the canids that were around in ancient Egypt, in ancient Rome, in ancient Greece. And we know that wolves and jackals and foxes and animals like that were already different things by the time writing appeared. Which means, really, you've only got a couple hundred years at best after the flood until you get to our first written records of canines, which includes this differentiation. So, good luck getting all that diversity out of 2 dogs in, I'll be generous and say 400 years, Kent. So, yeah.
And I say, well, do you believe all the dogs in the world came from a rock?
No, I do not. Do you, Bent?
No.
All right, but it is a question, which means we have to poll the audience. Do you believe all the dogs in the world came from a rock? I'm not going to put Iraq, even though that would be the easy pun. Which they also didn't come from there either, but whatever. I mean, some dogs did. Not all of them. All right, there is the poll. So, audience, feel free to answer the poll as you see fit, but please try to be truthful. And after I say, please try to be truthful, of course, Turtle takes over immediately.
You're welcome.
Which is precisely what they believe.
Yeah, let's just take a drink for that. Just dub and very blatant lie. And I say lie because he's been correct on this numerous times. If I say it like, hey, Bent, I happen to know that your favorite football team is the Toronto Blue Jays. And then you tell me, actually, not only is my favorite team not the Toronto Blue Jays, but that's not even a football team. And then I keep telling people that your favorite football team is the Toronto Blue Jays. You know what that means I'm doing?
It means you're lying.
Exactly. And I'm pretty sure that, by the way, your favorite football team is not the Toronto Blue Jays.
Right.
Okay. How's your favorite football team doing it, by the way?
They have been doing badly.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Poorly?
That's okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Jumping from microevolution, which is observable, to macroevolution takes a giant leap of faith and logic.
No, it's more of the same, right? It's the same as the difference between microerosion and macroerosion, right? So when I was living with my adopted human family after, trying to introduce myself to human society and figure out how all this whole civilization thing works, there were some woods nearby. And I used to walk through them sometimes to walk home from school, right? Because for part of my time schooling, I was just inside the radius for free bus rides. So they weren't offering a free bus ride. But I was a little bit too far away for it to be convenient for my parents to actually pick me up from school. But it also wasn't all that far. If I walked on the sidewalk, it would be I think it was like a mile and a half, which, whatever, I can walk a mile and a half. But I could cut through the woods and shave off a quarter mile or something. So sometimes I would do that. In the woods was a stream. Now, the stream obviously had a little bank and it went down. And, the shape of this bank followed the stream very closely. And so there was a little bit of erosion. That's like microerosion, right? That's kind of erosion that can happen over, maybe a couple decades or something. Now, Bent, you've seen some macroerosion, right?
Mm-hmm.
You've been to this place, what's it called? The Grande Canyon?
The Large Canyon.
The Large Canyon. There you go. And how deep is that? Do you remember? I think it's, like over a mile in some places?
I wouldn't be surprised.
So
it goes down quite a ways.
A lot more than that little meter deep, lightly sloping bank over by the stream that I was walking by as a kid, right?
Very much so. 6,000 feet deep. So
that's more than a mile.
More than a mile.
All right. So what's the difference between microerosion and macroerosion? It's just time
more
scale.
of the same.
Yeah, it's more of the same thing. Once you get enough microevolution that you have speciated, you are now in macroevolution territory. And because species don't just split cleanly, you can't just identify a point in time when one species becomes two, because it's a gradual process of increasing reproductive isolation. You can't even tell when you've transitioned between micro and macroevolution. It's that smooth. But when you start with microevolution and then you now have two very distinct species that you can tell apart, well, it's definitely happened. And that's all. That's it. That's all macroevolution is it's speciation and then any change that happens above that level. And we've seen it happen. We've seen instances of speciation, both in the lab and in the wild. Like recently, there was a new species that we saw form on the Galapagos Islands of those Galapagos tanagers that people like to call finches. That happened in real time. Currently, in North America, apple maggot flies are speciating from hawthorn maggot flies based on which fruit they like to parasitize. Apple maggot flies lay their eggs in apple flowers, and then their maggots live in apples and eat the apple. Hawthorn maggot flies, as you might not be surprised to learn, lay their eggs on hawthorn flowers and live inside hawthorn berries, which, makes sense if you listen to the names. But the thing is that hawthorn berries and apples don't fruit at the same time. And so they are increasingly reproductively isolated because the apple maggot flies are adapting to the life cycle of apples, which are an introduced fruit from Europe. There were no apples in North or South America until Europeans came. And the hawthorn maggot flies are keeping with their older life cycle that happens at a different time of year. That's happening right now. They're not completely split. There's still some crossover. But as time goes, they will only continue to increase in isolation because there are fewer and fewer opportunities for crossings. Fits of Rage for $2 says, but have you been to the Tall or even Venti Canyon? I've never been to the Tall Canyon, but I have been to the Venti Canyon, yes. It was okay. By the way, I hate the sizes at Starbucks. Starbucks. It's just give me regular sizing. I don't know what any of this means. Just stop. Let's see. Alex Markle says, but Dapper, Smooth Brain McGee here thinks otherwise. True, that he does. All right, let's hit play. I've done enough ranting about micro versus macroevolution.
Nobody's ever seen any of this happen at all.
That's just a lie. Take a drink. I mean, we've just seen it in recent years. So, okay. Also, when it comes to his other things that he thinks are evolution, like stellar formation, we currently can see protostellar disks. We can currently see protostars, T-Tauri stars, stars at any age of their life, stars that are currently just starting to have their first bits of fusion, all that. We can see protoplanetary disks. We can see protoplanetary disks with rings, with gaps in the rings, indicating the formation of planets currently, right now. New star systems with planets forming right now. We can see that with telescopes. We could see some of the earliest galaxies that have not actually turned into galaxies as we are familiar with them at this point. We can see galaxies that still have active galactic nuclei shooting out gigantic jets of matter in either direction, perpendicular to the plane of the galaxy. All of these are just things we can actually just see right now. We can watch nucleosynthesis happen by studying stellar spectra or looking at the remains of supernovae. These are real things we can observe. We're watching the Big Bang happen right now. You can see it happen with a modest telescope and just knowing where to look in the sky. You can watch the Big Bang, because if you can see anything that's redshifted, that redshift is part of the process of the Big Bang. We're living through the Big Bang right now. The Big Bang isn't a single instant in time. It's the entire process of the expansion of the universe, which is ongoing. Gupdu3, who's been a member for 16 months and is at the Tetrapod level, says, time change messed me up again, so here's Mothra. Well, thank you very much for the Mothra. We will take a drink, even though that's not technically the Mothra emoji, but you can send the Mothra emoji. I'm going to assume you intended to. Okay, let's keep going.
There's a variety of dogs, and they might have had a common ancestor, and it was a dog.
As I've said many times, Kent, if you pick any group of organisms that have some, common taxonomy, and you say, I bet their common ancestor was a member of that taxon, you will be correct. There's many humans. I'll bet they had a common ancestor. I'll bet it was human. Yep. There are many apes. I'll bet they had a common ancestor, and it was an ape. Also, yep. There are many primates, and I'll bet they all had a common ancestor, and it was a primate. Also true. There are very many mammals, and I'll bet they all had a common ancestor, and it was a mammal. Also correct. There are many vertebrates. We'll just go to vertebrates. And I'll bet they all had a common ancestor, and it was a vertebrate. Yep. And so on and so forth. Same at any level that you care to pick. Right? That's how it always works.
Macroevolution is imagination. It's based on imagination. It's a fantasy. It didn't happen.
Let's just take a drink. This one's getting me a little annoyed already.
But they try to always argue, where's the line between micro and macro? I don't know. In every case, in some cases it's...
Do you know in any cases, Kent? Any case. I want you to tell me, pick anything that you can positively identify as a kind, even humans in this case, and tell me how much morphological change it would take to count as macroevolution. That's it. That's all I want. You pick any one kind. I don't care if you think it's a kind, if you say well, elephants and pine trees are in different kinds. Okay, pick one of those. tell me what's in that kind, what isn't in that kind, and then tell me how much morphological change would it take for an elephant to not be an elephant anymore, and to have therefore changed in kind. You know what the secret is? You know what his actual answer is?
He's got no idea.
Yeah, he has no idea. He hasn't. I don't think he's ever even thought about it, because this isn't a statement.
I don't think he would understand the question.
He might not. This isn't a statement that he makes because of some evidentiary or even logical process that he's gone through to figure this out. This is just a statement that, well, if anything ever changed to do two different kinds, then my claim that the kinds are fixed is wrong. And, of course, the whole idea of kinds itself is based on the same kind of logic, right? That, well, the kinds are the things God created at the beginning, and since he said that he created different things at the beginning, there must be multiple of them. The whole thing is just nonsense built on more nonsense, where no definitions that are useful are ever actually given. Right? He doesn't have a definition for kind, so he can't tell when one thing would have transitioned into another kind, so he can't tell you what he even thinks macroevolution is, which means that the only definition of macroevolution that we even have is the standard one, in which speciation counts as macroevolution. We don't have any other definitions. Even if Kent rejects that definition, he doesn't have one that we can use to replace it.
Obvious, and I think maybe discovering where the line is a good field of research for science.
Well, that sounds fun. Too bad no one's been able to do it.
But to give examples of micro and therefore assume that all the rest go together is not a good pursuit for science.
Now, it's one of those yes and no things, right? Like, a whole bunch of small changes to a species don't on their own indicate that speciation is a possibility. However, if we fail to find any mechanism that stops certain kinds of changes that would cause speciation, then that would be like a good reason to argue against macroevolution. We haven't found anything. In fact, no one's even proposed a plausible mechanism for that. But further, we also have observed actual instances of macroevolution, and yeah, they're just made up of a bunch of microevolution. That's it.
That is a pursuit for religionists, those who want to believe in evolution. That's perfectly fine.
Just take a drink.
So the teachers give the kids examples of one and try to make them believe in the other. In advertising, it is called bait and switch. If I ran an ad in the paper that said, new Mercedes, $10, how many of you would line up to come get the car?
I would not, because that sounds like exactly like a scam.
It's a scam.
It sounds as much like a scam as earlier today when a website was like, hey man, maybe you should update your Flash player. I was like, no. I'm not gonna update my Flash player in 2023. Thank you though. It's a good effort. Good effort. I may have been trying to watch a Marvel show without having Disney Plus. I'm not saying that I was. I'm just saying that that's the kind of thing you might expect if you were trying to watch one of the Marvel shows without Disney Plus. Maybe that website would be like, hey, why don't you get a new Flash player? It's been a while since you updated that Flash player. Which, to be fair, it has been a while since I updated Flash player.
Yeah.
Remember that used to happen actually kind of a lot? And I was like, oh, there's a new version of Flash player. Like every few weeks or something. I was like, why does Flash player keep needing these updates? Oh, well.
Everybody, right? Suppose when you arrived at the door, I said, well, it's actually $99,000. We sold the $10 one. Well, no, hold it. If I run an ad, new Mercedes, $10, I better have a new Mercedes for $10. If I don't, it's illegal. It's called bait and switch advertising. I baited you to get you to come into the store, and then I switched it on you for something else.
Okay, so hold on. If you went around saying free ice cream to kids, and then when they're eating the ice cream, you say, hey, can I talk to you about Jesus? That sounds a whole lot like what he's describing here, isn't it?
A little bit of a bait and switch.
Huh. Now, he's told stories about he and other people doing exactly that. Is Kent Hovind also guilty of bait and switch tactics to convert little kids to Christianity to up his soul number without actually caring whether or not any of those conversions were actually authentic conversions to Christianity, whether or not those kids stayed Christian. Anything else? Just a weird, scammy little tactic to check off, to add like notches to his soul belt? That's interesting. Yeah. Bait and switch. So, Kent Hovind, the man who lures in small children with dinosaurs and ice cream, only to then try to get them to say sinner's prayers. That's the guy who's here complaining about bait and switch. Okay, that's good to know.
People go to jail for this bait and switch advertising.
Well, it's not why you went to jail, Kent, but it's good that you're aware that you should be in jail.
But that's exactly what's happening in the textbooks, though. Students are given one example, one definition.
Zerlon says, pretty sure Kent's soul count is negative. No, see, according to his beliefs, it can't be. Because Kent Hovind believes in two things which make it literally impossible for his soul count to go below 0 in terms of people saved. First, he believes in easy believism, which means if at any point you have sincerely believed that Jesus Christ died on the cross to save you from your sins, and you have accepted that offer of salvation sincerely, as just a mental state, you are now saved, during that time at least. But he also believes in once saved, always saved. Which means, if at any point you accepted that belief as true, and also opted to accept this gift that God is allegedly giving you of salvation, you cannot ever lose it. Even if, for instance, you sincerely, while in a drunken stupor, prayed a sinner's prayer, asking to be led into heaven and to accept the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, during a blackout, and you woke up the next day not even remembering it happened, if Kent Hovind got you to say that sinner's prayer sincerely, guess what? You're now saved, according to Kent Hovind, and hits a notch in his soul belt. Even if you later go on and are never a Christian again, or if you were a Christian for a few years and you actively deconvert, doesn't matter. That's it. It's all it takes for Kent Hovind to up those notches. And he thinks that he will get better rewards in heaven the more souls that he notches onto that belt. That's why he has these weird tactics, like going to children, offering them ice cream, handing them like gospel tracts, or giving them little sermons, so that they say a little sinner's prayer, probably so that he'll go away and they can just enjoy their ice cream in peace. But if any of them do it sincerely, that's it. They're saved now. So,
score one for Kent.
Yep.
Definition of the word evolution, and then once they get them to believe in it, by giving them examples of macroevolution, they will switch it to try to include all the rest of them. And by then the kid is hooked and doesn't realize he has been brainwashed.
Bent, how many times have people given you instances of microevolution as evidence for the Big Bang?
0.
How many times have people given you microevolution as evidence for nucleosynthesis?
0.
How many times have people given you examples of microevolution as evidence for the planetary, like, nebular formation hypothesis?
None time.
None times? Okay. How many times have people given you examples of microevolution as examples for their particular hypothesis about the origin of life?
0.
Okay, cool. I'm going to go ahead and say that that's just Kent making stuff up. Here we go.
Yeah, I think so.
Look at this textbook. It says evolution is change over time. Ooh, now there's one definition. Now why?
I mean, that's like a dictionary definition, although I'm looking at this this book, Exploring Earth Science, which looks like it's for like second graders. So that's fun. I love it how Kent can barely comprehend textbooks written for small children, which I'm pretty sure is the only reason he cites them.
Watch how they narrow it down, though. Down here in the center part, it says, in other words, there is no doubt that living things have changed over time. Ooh,
where does it say that? Okay. Earlier in this chapter, you read about Earth's history. You learned that by studying rocks and fossils, scientists have developed a fairly accurate picture of how Earth and its inhabitants have changed over long periods of time. Although the picture is far from complete, there is no doubt that changes have occurred and that many of the living things on Earth today are very different from the living things that existed in the past. Yep, that's just faunal succession. We've known that for longer than we've had any good idea about evolution. In other words, there is no doubt that living things have changed over time. Yeah, no, all that's true. Yep. I don't think the kids who are reading Exploring Earth Science from Prenton's Hall, 1999 edition, are really old enough for changes in allele frequencies in a reproductive population over generational time. They're probably not ready for that definition.
Mm-mm.
But I'll bet if you looked at, say, a high school or a college textbook on evolutionary biology, you would find a better definition for evolution, Kent. DM Answers in Gojira Wings says, reminder, turtles are the best tetrapod. And that was for $2. Thank you very much. Remember that, everybody. Also, we're going to end this poll. I think we've got 49% who have said no. Let's see what the results are. No won with also 48%. Turtle got 40%, and yes had 10. And that, again, the question was, do you believe all dogs in the world came from a rock? So, no, 48. Turtle, 40%. And yes, only 10% with 74 votes. Thank you very much, everybody. Now, if I gotta find my stupid mouse cursor, here we go.
Now we're clear down to part 5 of our 6 parts of evolution. They've already bypassed Big Bang, they've already bypassed the stellar evolution, the chemical evolution, the origin of life. Now they're just saying living things have changed over time.
Ken, that was the earlier chapters. Remember when they said, in earlier chapters you read? You just didn't quote those chapters. Oh my. I'm taking a drink.
He doesn't read the whole textbook. He just reads a couple pages of it.
I know. I'm taking a drink. We're going on break. I'm going to get a new drink. Oh my goodness. That one really got to me.
Yeah.
Holy crap, Kent. If it were like chapter 1, right, then maybe. But it wasn't. Oh my goodness. And plus, exploring Earth history isn't going to have anything about the Big Bang, most likely, or nucleosynthesis, most likely. Because guess what? The theory about the formation of the Earth doesn't depend on either of those particular ideas very strongly. A whole bunch of things could be true about the entire history of the whole universe, or on where different atoms come from, and it would still result in the nebular hypothesis being viable and all of our stuff about Earth science working. All right. Deboop has been a member for 6 months and is at the annual level, but also sends a blank membership chat. Well, thank you very much for your support for the channel. We will come back in just a few minutes, and I will have a quick post-break little thing to say, and then we'll be right back into Kent. So in the meantime, please enjoy the musical stylings of one Beethoven. And we are back. Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back, Bent.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Yeah, it is. It is good to be back. So first, I would like to say real quick before we really get back into this, as I'm sure most of you know, that this channel is almost entirely supported directly through user support. It is from you guys doing things like super chatting, sending super stickers, super thanks, joining the channel memberships, joining the Patreon, things like that. Now, if you are not currently actively supporting the channel financially, and that's something that you would like to do, it is actually pretty easy to do. We have a number of good ways to do that. We have the Patreon, the channel membership. Those are the two primary ways to do that. The channel memberships, you can just do that with the join channel button down below. There's also the Patreon, which is linked in the description. Also, Benthoven has his own Patreon if you want to help support him more directly instead of supporting me more directly, you know.
Thank you.
Also an option. Now, if you join my Patreon, you will get access to early access to videos. So most videos go up like 4 or 5 months before the actual time when they go like live for the premiere. There was just one put out today. It probably won't be up until like March or April or something crazy like that. That will also give you, like, you can get your name in the credits. There's higher tiers with more rewards. All of that stuff is detailed in the membership level descriptions on either join the channel or the Patreon. You can also gain access to the Discord for channel members and patrons only. So that's cool. I do quite enjoy that. Also, if we're buffering, let me know, because I'm finding that Bent's video is freezing from time to time all of a sudden, and I don't know why.
Yeah, I'm hearing your audio cut out.
Maybe it's a Discord thing.
Oops.
If anyone
I
could
think
check
it
to
is.
see if there's Discord problems going on, let me know. But I also say that like maybe there's a problem because YouTube is also complaining about my bitrate, which is very high, so I don't know why they're complaining about it. But okay. Anyway, if an annual, also on Patreon you can get a 15% discount if you go annual. So for less than $10, you can get a year's worth of access to early access, the special Discord server, all that stuff. If you go to the $1 level. If a monthly subscription or pledge or an annual one isn't your thing, but you still want to support, there's also a merch store in the description where you can get baby onesies, you can get phone cases, mugs, t-shirts, hoodies, stickers, all sorts of stuff like that. There's all sorts of stuff in there. It's a Teespring link. And if none of that's right for you, but you still want to help support the channel, please make sure you like this video, like all the videos of mine that you watch. Watch several of my videos in a row if you can. Like if you're on a long trip or you're just doing house chores, maybe put on a selection of Dapper Dinosaur videos. I have some videos labeled The Movie. They're usually pretty long. They're great for things like road trips or chores, stuff like that. And make sure you share videos. Just share them to your Facebook page, your Twitter page, your Blue Sky page, your Instagram feed. I don't know, what else are the kids using these days? MySpace? Put them on MySpace. Kids love MySpace. Tom will be very interested in whatever I have in my videos. Tom will love it. So, oh, no audio is coming through?
What?
Okay.
Yeah, I can hear it. There's audio coming through.
Oh.
No, I can hear it on the video. We're both coming through.
Okay, well, that's good. Aunt Jer, I don't know. Probably on your end. All right. Anyway, yeah, so that is the thing. Yeah, it really helps, right? In fact, the money that I get from things like you guys watching ads on videos is by far the smallest amount of income after merch, right? I don't sell a whole lot of merch, so like, you know, each year I might make a few dozen dollars on merch. But that's roughly what I make on like people watching ads each month, right? It's tiny amounts. the only reason this channel can stay afloat is because of your generosity. So please, if you want to see this channel continue, try checking out the Patreon or the channel memberships, or both if you want to, and doing things like super chatting and things like that. And yeah, remember, it's very easy to get us a drink. If you want to bump this drink counter up to like 170 like we had that one time, the power is in your hand. Kent Hovind's not going to get it to 170, I can promise you that. But
No,
you
no.
could. You could. All right. Now, there's one last thing I want to mention before we get back into Kent, but it is about Kent. And that is that textbook that he was looking at, that he's complaining about using macroevolution as their evidence for all of what he calls evolution, which is not true, because, again, the evidence for the history of Earth was given in earlier chapters. What they're actually talking about here is not microevolution, but faunal succession, right? So that's the fact that as you go through the fossil record, what fauna, which is animals, but also flora, that are there, changes over that time. So when you look at the very bottom, you get a certain faunal assemblage. Then you look a bit higher, and different animals have taken over. You get a little bit higher, you get some of the first plants, but also the animals are different, and so on and so forth. Which means that what is alive on Earth has changed over time. It has nothing to do with microevolution on its own, right? It's just the observed fact of faunal succession in the fossil record. That's what they're using. They're not talking about microevolution. So Kent Hovind is once again displaying his functional illiteracy because he cannot understand this textbook for babies. Now, Carrie Bronson for $5 says, your tutu probably annoys Kevin Sorbo, which makes me love it even more. Well, if you want to see more of the tutu,
Thank you.
there is one way to do it, and it is fan funding on a video. When those live streams hit certain goals, today the goal is 290, and I will let you know that we are currently 255 away from the next tutu. So we've got a ways to go if you want to see another tutu, but it's possible.
Anything could happen.
I'm just not expecting it.
Well, what happened to the first four? See, they switched it on them. Then you go to another page here, and it says, evolution is defined as a change in species over time. Oh, now they've narrowed it down again. Now they're changing within the species. Well, I agree with
Actually, I'm not sure that that's what they're saying, right? Because it doesn't say within a species. There's a change in species over time. I think what the implication might be is that species all change over time. And that leaves open the part about speciation. But it's also sort of a not very clearly written paragraph, or sentence, I suppose. Although actually this next sentence probably does clarify. A species is a group of living organisms that share similar characteristics and that can interbreed with one another to produce fertile offspring. I don't love that definition, but again, it's a book for babies. So yeah, it's a bit sloppy, but again, you're just trying to get the basics across to a bunch of kids, most of whom will not end up as evolutionary biologists, and so do not need an in-depth knowledge of this. They just need to know the very basics, right? It's sort of like, when you went over the water cycle in like high school, right? Like, Bent, did you go over the water cycle in high school? I don't know.
No,
Sorry.
not in my high school.
Well, in my high school, we went over the water cycle, right? And that's a big part of things like, meteorology. Does that mean that because of my high school knowledge of the water cycle, I could take over Maddie's job, who is, a meteorologist? No! No, it does not mean that. All right, and Renee Demers just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Thank you very much. They went to Heather Kuhn, Margaret Rosenberg, Little Old Mimi, James Hall, and Mongoose King of the Wastelands. Let's take 5 drinks for that. Thank you very much. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. You think the chat can make me run out of this drink and have to go get a new one before we're done?
Absolutely. The chat's capable of a lot.
Yeah. Let's see. Of course, Kent might do it if he continues to be this stupid.
with that. See, they're giving a definition of evolution. They keep changing the definition.
No, Kent. That's the first time they defined evolution. Kent doesn't even understand the difference between thinking these parts of science are true and not evolution, and thinking that they're all evolution and then using a bait and switch. That was the first time they gave a definition for evolution in terms of like a biological context, Kent. which is what the theory of evolution is, right? You can talk about stellar evolution, which is, how stars go from being a cloud of dust all the way to being stellar remnants, like white dwarfs, neutron stars, or black holes, right? Those are all, that's called stellar evolution, but it's not biological evolution. And when you say, in the context of a discussion about science, that you want to talk about evolution, what everyone assumes is that you're talking about biological evolution.
Yeah, that's what that means.
Yep.
That's why they assume that.
Just like when you say, oh, I want to talk about gravity, very few people are going to say, oh, do you want to talk about what my, I don't know, my gynecologist told me about my last pregnancy? Did you know that the word gravity is connected etymologically to pregnancy through the Greek word that it derives from? You know what that means for whether or not what your gynecologist told you during your last pregnancy, how relevant that is to a discussion about gravity? It doesn't mean anything. It's still completely irrelevant. Your gynecologist's report on your last pregnancy means nothing when it comes to gravity. So, yeah. Kent No Relation Halstead, there we go, for $5 says, Kent Hovind is a living example of why exceptions were made during Jim Crow era voting laws. Yeah, I don't think he would have passed any of those literacy exams, even as a white person. Because in case you guys don't know, yeah, in the U.S. during Jim Crow era, there were literacy exams to be able to vote. Now, you might think, well, that's easy. I can read. Okay, but if you were black, the literacy exam might be something like, I would like you to quote, the one of Shakespeare's sonnets entirely, verbatim. And then a white person strolls in and they're like, hey, can you read this first grade primer on English? Okay, you can vote. Oh, I'm sorry, black guy, you're struggling to recite an entire Shakespearean sonnet from memory? Oh, man, I guess you can't read, because there you go. Bye, you can't vote. And yeah, Ken probably would have been one of those, the white guys who still couldn't have passed the literacy test, even though he's a white man. DM speciation isn't macroevolution. Oh, man. Says Kent, or is quoting Kent, I don't understand what I just read, therefore evolution is wrong, with a whole bunch of mantra. Thank you very much. And ending with an attempt at a mantra. Thank you. Okay, here we go.
Evolution is really a change in species over time, then let's get the Big Bang out of the textbook.
No, Kent. The fact that it's not evolution doesn't mean that it's not true.
He doesn't give a reason why.
No, he doesn't. It's just, well, if it's not the theory of evolution, if it's actually a different thing, then why would we put it in the textbook? I don't know, because it's still true, Kent. Like, it doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't.
If we got... I don't know.
Let's get origin of life out of the textbook, because that's not part of this.
I mean, it was barely in the textbook already, so sure. I mean, I don't know how much more it could be less in the textbook than this. We're just going to not mention that life came about at some point? Like, how could you even have a history of the Earth and not mention that, hey, there wasn't life at one point, but now there is? That's the origin of life. You just mentioned it.
Seems pretty unique to Earth.
Yeah.
Therefore important.
It does. It's also the kind of thing that most of the readers of the book are. Alive. Life forms.
Yeah.
I say most of, because I don't know how many AI bots are reading that book.
Or zombies.
Yeah, they could be those smart zombies. Or liches. Don't forget the liches.
Oh, I forgot.
Liches get stitches. That's what they say. They don't say that. That's not a thing. I just made that up.
That's how they bait and switch the kids every time. Students are
It wasn't even how they baited and switched them. In your special cherry-picked example, Kent. You couldn't give an example of it. You failed entirely to one, make any sense of how that was a valid argument, and to two, even give an example that could be reasonably interpreted as the thing you're talking about. I'm taking a drink, and then I will read this first super chat on the channel, so I want to say a very special thank you for that. So first, here's the drink. Now, Jesse Van Spiker Mallet? I'm sorry, man. Look, I do not know exactly how to pronounce that, but if you give me a pronunciation guide, preferably with the International Phonetic Alphabet, I will try my best. But anyway, Jesse for $5 says Kent Hovind literally only has write once memory like a CD. That's really good. Once it's written, there's no changing it. His memory is as old as his sources. Oh, I love that comparison. That's awesome. Good. Oh, thank you so much. And thank you very much for your first super chat on the channel. I really do appreciate it. It really means a lot when someone stops by and then they're, for the first time, they're like, you know what? This guy deserves some support. Here's some of my hard-earned money to turn into money for you. And so thank you very much. All right, here we go.
Given examples from macroevolution.
Which your book didn't do, actually, so far.
And then the real meaning is slipped in, like they try to talk about cosmic evolution and organic evolution. And then,
which was never used as evidence for one for the other, Kent, in your examples. Okay, Kent, I'm talking to Kent like he's ever going to watch this. But let's pretend he does. If you want to say that X is used as evidence for Y, you need to find something that can be reasonably be parsed as X, therefore Y. If you can't do that, even when you're cherry-picking books for babies, then it's not a reasonable claim to make.
And they have the gall to tell the students, if you don't believe in evolution, you don't understand science.
I mean, would I say that to a student? If I were a teacher, would it be true? That's actually not an obvious answer to me. So it is true that as an adult, if you don't accept science, there's a very good chance that you don't understand science. Or sorry, if you don't accept evolution, there's a very good chance you don't understand science. But for a child, I'm not sure that that's true. I don't know. You certainly don't understand biology very well, but that's not the same thing as not understanding science broadly. Like, you can understand a lot of science without knowing a whole lot about specific branches of science and therefore be wrong about them. So I don't know. I mean, you certainly understand less science than you could if you don't accept evolution. Unless you just never heard of it, in which case, you still understand less science than you could. So I guess it's kind of reasonable to say that. I still don't think you should. I think you should have a less confrontational way to explain that to a student, but, here we go.
I get this all the time. They'll say, oh, but you don't understand science. I think
Well, that's true.
That is very true.
That's obviously true.
You can't even understand a book for babies, right? Like, your level of reading comprehension is barely getting to, like, the Hungry Caterpillar level, right? Never mind, like, a textbook for 6-year-olds.
I do understand science.
We'll just take a drink for how dumb that was.
No.
Goodness. Yeah, it's one of the things he understands the least.
Science means knowledge, things that we know.
It doesn't just mean knowledge, Kent. Okay. So here's the thing, right? I am generally speaking, I'm a descriptivist. I'm not very keen on making proscriptive rules about language. Now, that being said, there are certain somewhat artificial varieties of English that are used in formal contexts where I will be a prescriptivist because there are guidelines for the use of English in this context which must be followed in order to be taken seriously in that context. But generally speaking, I'm a descriptivist. So, now, knowledge is justified, true belief. So first, you have to believe it. Second, it actually has to be the case that what you believe is true. And third, you have to have good reasons for it. So, for instance, if you believe something and you have good reasons for it, but it happens to not be true, well, that's just being honestly mistaken despite having good evidence. That happens, right? On the other hand, if you believe something, but it is true, but you don't have good reasons for it, well, that's a lucky guess, right? So if I said, like, the winner of the Super Bowl will be the Jets. And let's just say by wild coincidence that were true. I know it's not going to be the Jets, don't worry. If it did turn out to be true, and I gave you my reasoning was like, well, I just like the name of the team. That's really bad reasoning, but I did happen to guess right. So I didn't know that to be the case. That's a lucky guess. On the other hand, If something is true and you have good reason to believe it, but you just don't, well, then you don't know it. That's what knowledge is. Science, let's just look up a definition for science, because it's not just knowledge, because you can believe something justifiably without it being science. Science, according to, this is dictionary.com, is the systematic study of the structure and behavior of the physical and natural world through observation, experimentation, and the testing of theories against the evidence obtained. And then it has a second definition listed as archaic, which means if you use it this way, it is not the way that people use it anymore, and you will be confusing to people, but you might encounter it in older works. Knowledge of any kind. So when I say science doesn't just mean knowledge, that's what I mean. The first definition I gave you is a definition that people use nowadays. Knowledge of any kind as a definition for science is currently not in use. But you should know about it just in case. So when Ken says science means knowledge, that is incorrect. He could say science used to mean knowledge, and it comes from a Latin word that means knowledge. Fair enough. But that's not what he says. All right. Here we go.
No, we can observe, we can test, we can demonstrate. Evolution is none of those. It's not knowledge, it's belief. And if you want to believe it, fine. Just don't call it science, that's all.
No, Kent, all of that's wrong. It is science because it is conclusions that are reached based off of things like empirical evidence, data, experimentation, and the testing of subsequent data on the basis of those hypotheses that are formed from the previous data and experiments. That doesn't make it right? Science could be wrong about something. Right? For a while, people thought that there was a substance called the ether that pervaded the universe, which was the medium through which light traveled. Because if something's a wave, which they thought light was just a wave, waves have to wave something, right? Like sound waves the air. The breakers at the beach, those wave the water. That's the water waves. Well, what's the light a wave in? Well, it's in the luminiferous ether. The substance. It's very, very light. It's very, very non-viscous. It pervades the universe, but it's what light travels through. That was science. There were predictions on that came true. It explained the data that they were seeing, but it was wrong. There's no ether. Science doesn't mean knowledge. If it did, then nothing that is scientific could ever be false. We know that's not the case. And science is a thing that you do, right? It's a collective activity. It's not just anything you happen to know.
See, we observe lots of variations, and variations certainly happen, but they have limits. Haven't the farmers been trying to get bigger pigs? Doesn't every farmer want to breed the biggest pig he can get? If assuming he's raising the pigs for sale.
No, there are other considerations, right? Erifamian just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. Let's take some drinks for that. Okay. They went to Jordan Holloway, Lily P, Pragmatic Crystal, Adam Useless, then there's a 4-letter word at the end, and WS Wordsman. Thank you very much. Here we go. 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Thank you very much, Erifamian. Okay, so there are other considerations, right? Like maybe flavor. Maybe a smaller pig tastes better. Maybe a fatter pig, but not necessarily a longer or taller pig is going to taste better because of better marbling, right? Like that's what makes Wagyu beef so delicious is the intermuscular fat. Maybe that's what you want to breed for because you're not trying to breed for high volume. You're trying to breed for high value pork. Okay. Or maybe you are breeding pigs for ribs. And so you care about their length, but not so much their height or weight. So if you can get a longer pig with more ribs, which by the way, there are breeds of pigs that are called long breeds that specifically have been bred to have more ribs than most pigs, specifically to sell their ribs. Nice. Yeah. Hey, remember that time I made like the good version of the McRib sandwich?
Yeah.
Man, that was pretty. We gotta do that again sometime, but like maybe in a few months because I don't want to have a heart attack from having that sandwich twice in like a year. It was not a healthy sandwich. Anyway, so yeah, maybe you're breeding for length, but you don't care about the mass or the height. So are you breeding bigger pigs? I don't know. Now that being said, most people aren't like, raising teacup pigs for sale as pork, to be fair, right? Those are mostly just pets or novelty animals. So no, it's not just the fact that pig farmers want bigger pigs. Now, that's often the case, right? All things being equal, a bigger pig is probably going to make you more money than a smaller pig. It's not always true. So, here we go.
Okay. Do you think there's a limit to the size?
Yeah, so there are certain biological limits, right? Like nerve impulses can only travel so fast, which limits the ability of an animal to coordinate its biological functions. So, for instance, if an animal got too long, it wouldn't be able to send a signal from its brain all the way down to, say, its hind legs to actually coordinate the animal's gait. So it would tend to trip up and fall over and whatnot. Also, like, an actual biological heart can really only effectively pump so much blood across a certain size body, which is probably a little bit bigger than a blue whale's body, right? Just because muscle fibers can only physically be so strong because they're physically made of certain proteins that have physical limits on their strength, right? Like compressive and tensile strength of like myelin fibers and things like that are in your muscles. Like there's a physical limit to that. So just moving the animal would become a problem at certain sizes. Kent, no relation to Halstead, for $5 says, maybe Kent would have paid closer attention to textbooks if they had rough, glittery fabric embedded in the pages. Yeah, he might have. I mean, it would certainly be catchy, like, oh, hey. And I do like that there's, the reference that I made to the Hungry Caterpillar. I actually don't know that Kent has read the Hungry Caterpillar. I read it to a few nieces and nephews. It's the only reason I even know what it is. Because it was not a thing when I was just, adopted into my human family when they were going through like the baby level human stuff. Because even if you're, 150, 160 million year old Ceratosaurus who's been around and seen a lot, it doesn't mean you understand a lot of like English and how human society works. So I'm still kind of starting off at the base level with like, see Spot, run. Run, Spot, run. Little picture of a little dog named Spot, Not a cat named Spot, which would also have been cool. Especially if that cat was sort of like gender fluid. Like sometimes it was a male cat, but then maybe later it gave birth to a litter of kittens. And then maybe one day it was an iguana. Who knows?
That can happen.
That can
In
happen.
space.
Yeah, that can happen in space. Those darn space cats. All right, here we go.
Do you think they'll ever get a pig as big as Texas?
And no, for all the reasons that I just limited. None of which, by the way, were barriers to evolution, right? These were all physical problems with biology and had nothing to do with how much the genetic code can vary.
No, I bet there's a limit in there somewhere, right?
Right, but not an evolutionary limit, Kent. That's a physical limit, right? That's like if I said, hey, Bent.
Yeah.
How far can a car drive?
Very far.
Do you think, like, in its lifetime, that the car could, say, drive 100,000 miles?
Easily.
What about 200,000 miles?
Some cars, yeah.
What about 238,900 miles?
Sure.
So you're saying I could drive a car to the moon?
Not quite.
Okay. Are you saying that there's a difference between the two questions? How far can a car drive? And can a car go to the moon? Like maybe I'm making a fundamental error in my reasoning here?
Yeah, cars don't work in space.
Oh my goodness. So if I said, are there barriers to evolution? And clearly that means, are there barriers to the amount that a genome can vary over time? And then I say, yeah, but could Godzilla evolve? And the answer is no, because of physical limits, but not genetic limits, that maybe I'm being intentionally dishonest at worst, or just have absolutely no clue what I'm talking about at best.
Sounds reasonable.
Weird. By the way, if you have a car with 2,389, or let me double check it, 238,900 miles on it, you now have a lunar car. I'm declaring that. That's what that means. You have a lunar car.
Congratulations.
Congratulations. Which is also interesting because, like, when you actually go to the moon, like when, like, Apollo or more recently the Artemis mission went to the moon, it wasn't like it was powered at thrusting that entire time. So it's not even really the same kind of travel, right? Because a car, when it moves, it has to always be providing forward momentum because of all the friction and whatnot. But with spaceships, they coast almost that entire time. So it's not even the same kind of moving. It's interesting. So Danielle Gable asks about Eric with Erica. I'm gonna double check with Erica. I know that she did her comps recently. So I am going to ask her if she would like to do a revival. It might be that she's going to be very busy with like looking for postdoctoral positions. I don't know. I cannot currently ask or answer the question if there's going to be a revival of the series. Don't hold your breath because I have no idea what her schedule is like. It's not a no, but it's also definitely not a yes. And I cannot answer the question any better than that. I wish I could because I enjoy the series. She said she enjoyed the series. I would like to revive it. I'm sure Bent would like more breaks. So
yeah, that would be good.
Although it would also be fewer opportunities for the tutu. Although I will say, if you guys double the tutu number for Bent on any stream, I'll wear a tutu on the stream after. So, in my human suit, on a webcam, I will get into my stuffy human suit, add the even stuffier tutu, and suffer like that for you guys.
Not sure exactly where the limit is, but it's somewhere less than the size of Texas, and maybe a little bigger than they are now. I don't know if you get a 1,000-pound hog or not, but you might get a 1,200-pounder someday, or 1,400-pounder, but you never get a 4 billion-ton hog. Okay, there's a limit.
Cool. So there are limits to the physical size of organisms, and we don't even have a proposed limit for evolution. Neat. Thanks, Kent. Thank you for confirming that there is not even a proposed option for a limit to how much genetics can vary in a population. Robert Adsit, who's been a member for 13 months and is at the amniote level, says, farmers want the biggest pig. Maybe Kent should check what KFC did to chicken breeds with Godzilla. Oh, yeah, that was a thing. Let's talk about that for a second. Yeah, chickens have, like, doubled in mass at least since, like, the 50s. And a lot of it has been led by things like, restaurants wanting gigantic chicken breasts. And they now reach like enormous sizes in ridiculously small amounts of time. The same thing has happened with domesticated turkeys. They're basically just grotesque monsters. Meat bred fowl are just weird, horrible abominations who can't breed anymore, by the way. While I'm not endorsing Mike Rowe overall, because I don't care to endorse celebrities generally on the channel, I will say that he did an episode on turkey breeding of his show Dirty Jobs, in which he had to extract the semen from a male turkey into a little like a little deposit jar via suction, where there's a little tube that goes from the cloaca of the turkey, and then it goes past the jar, which is supposed to catch it via gravity, and the suction is provided orally. Definitely got some in his mouth.
Ew.
Yeah. So, yeah. Factory farming is horrible, and we should probably not do it. It's one of the reasons I try not to eat meat daily, even though as an American, it's very easy to eat meat daily. It's also why when I have the option and I can afford it, I prefer to do things like eat cage-free chicken, cage-free eggs, things like that. I can't always do that. Unfortunately, meat is often the cheapest protein choice that I have, other than beans. And quite frankly, I can't eat beans every single day anymore. I did that for years and years, and I just can't do it anymore. So I do still eat meat, but I would like it if we could reduce at least factory farming. And I personally, for both health and ethical and environmental reasons, try to keep my meat eating relatively low. And I try to get meat that was raised in as reasonably humane conditions as I possibly can. And I'm not perfect, guys. I screw that up, right? I definitely eat factory farm meat, and I'm not going to pretend I don't. But I try to make an effort, and I would encourage all of you to try to make that effort if you can. If you can't, right? If it's a budget strap thing and like you need the nutrition, you're trying to feed a family, and like Hamburger Helper with factory raised steers going into the ground beef, and that's just what you need. Like, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong for feeding your family some ground beef from a factory farm. But if you can afford it, try to reduce meat, try to get cruelty-free or at least as humanely raised meat as possible. So, there you go. That's my little meat thing.
Variations happen, but there are limits. And the farther you get from the norm, the more problems you have, the more you got to babysit the thing.
What does that mean? The farther you get from... What the heck does the norm mean, Kent? What's the norm for organisms, broadly? I sure don't know. They say, oh, like, taking in oxygen and making ATP and ADP and whatnot. Okay, well, I mean, there's a lot of anaerobic bacteria. Are they away from the norm? I mean, anaerobic respiration almost certainly predates aerobic respiration. Is the norm single cell or multicell? I don't know. Are we talking about the norm for a species? Well, evolution is all about changing what the norm is in the first place. So what does it mean to go away from the norm? I don't even know. That's not a thing that evolutionary biologists talk about, so I'll take a drink, because I don't even know what's happening right now. Here we go.
If you turn them 1,000-pound hogs loose back in the woods, they won't survive.
There's literally a feral hog problem right now that is the result of domesticated pigs in many countries being released. It's a problem not just in the United States, but like throughout North America. There are problems with this in other countries that don't natively have, sus scrofa populations, which is the species that the domesticated pig belongs to. I mean, there are people in the United States who are killed by feral domesticated pigs. So, granted, there are probably some pork breeds of pig that won't survive, but broadly speaking, domesticated pigs do just fine when you turn them loose in the wild. In fact, they do too fine. To the point that in the United States, now this isn't legal or hunting advice, but as far as I know, there are no places where there are limits on how many feral hogs you can kill, nor on the methods that you can use to kill them, as long as your methods follow all the other laws in whatever area you're in, right? So, like, if you have local laws that say, like, you can't just set off explosives, well, you can't hunt hogs with explosives then. But if there's no law against, like, say, semiotic rifle fire from a helicopter, generally, then as far as I know, again, not legal advice, as far as I know, you can hunt hogs from a helicopter with a semi-automatic rifle and kill as many as you can. You don't even have to use them. You can just kill them because they're an invasive species that is taking over parts of the country. So we'll just take a drink for, like, Ken thinking that apparently hogs are just incapable of taking care of themselves in the wild, because they are certainly not. So, yeah.
Nature would select against them surviving.
Okay, so that's actually an interesting point. So in some ways, yes, in other ways, no. But what actually tend to happen, and what has happened, is that they would tend to trend back towards the phenotype that we see in wild European boars, which is the species that the domesticated pig is descended from. And that is true, right? If you look at feral hogs in the United States, on average, morphologically, they're far more similar to wild boars in Europe than they are to most domesticated pigs, right? They actually have pretty big tusks. They tend to be pretty furry, whereas most, domesticated pigs tend to be relatively sparsely furred, kind of nakedish. At least for many breeds, right? It's not all of them. Yeah, so I mean, there is some ways in which that's true, but they still descended from domesticated pigs who were typical of domesticated pigs. It's just that over time, yeah, that selection pressure, which is very similar to the pressures that shaped the wild boars in the first place, tended to move them towards a boar-like physiology, which is indeed microevolution. So if Kent goes on to say that's microevolution, he's not wrong. But also, are we saying that domesticated pigs are away from the norm? Is norm just the same thing as wild type? Because if that's the case, then natural selection leads to just different wild types, which means that that's still the norm, right? If the norm is wild type, then no matter what evolution does, as long as it's not artificial selection, then that's the norm, and so we don't have to worry about this difference from the norm problem. So once again, Kent is just not defining his terms, making his argument not just bad, but not even an argument, right? It's not actually conveying a thought. He's not talking about anything. He's just saying words.
There's an optimum size for different climates. Natural.
I mean, that's also true, generally. Like, it's broadly true. So we'll take a drink for that. But that is also kind of the point of natural selection. So I don't know what we're...
Selection works, but it has nothing
Also
to do with
true.
evolution.
Oh my goodness.
Roaches eventually...
Taking 2 drinks. One for that being true, and then one for it being stupid. It has nothing to do with evolution. We'll talk about that in a second. 2 drinks. Here we go. 1, 2. Okay, so natural selection works. I'm not going to get into that. But it's not part of evolution. It's kind of like saying that an engine isn't part of a car. Now, granted, it's not the only part. And if you just had an engine, you certainly wouldn't have a car. But it's a very important part. And I don't think I would want to drive a car without an engine. And you can't really talk about cars for very long without at least mentioning the engine. And if you want a really good understanding of cars, you kind of have to understand engines. So, and that's the analogy I'm going to use, right? Natural selection is definitely a part of evolution. Even if Kent Hovind thinks evolution isn't true, it remains a big part of the theory of evolution, which means that he could just be wrong, and he could... At best, what he should say is, natural selection is true, and it's part of the theory of evolution, but on its own, it is insufficient to explain evolution as it is depicted by those who accept the modern theory of evolution. And there are other aspects which are incorrect, which invalidate the rest of the theory. That does not make it not part of evolution, right? So, for instance, I talked earlier about the luminiferous ether, right? Well, one of the reasons that they thought that light was just a wave was because they knew it had wavelengths, and they knew that it did things like have diffraction patterns and things when you sent it through like narrow slits and things like that. It would have interference patterns and things like that, right? And they could measure the wavelength of light. So wavelength was part of the theory of the luminiferous ether. There's no way to get around that. The whole reason that they thought that there was an luminiferous ether was because of the wave-like properties of light. Now, Bent, I'm pretty sure you know enough about physics. Does light have a wavelength?
Yes.
Does it create interference patterns that look like the interference patterns of waves?
Yes.
So, was it wrong that... Were the luminiferous ether guys wrong about these properties of light? No, obviously not.
No.
Was it part of their theory? Absolutely. It was a vital part of their theory. That doesn't make luminiferous ether theory right. So, at best, Kent Hovind could say, natural selection is an accurate part of evolution, but the entire theory as a whole is untrue, despite having some true aspects to it. That's what he should be saying, right? Instead, he's just going on with like the worst version of this argument possible. That it's not even part of evolution. Of course it is. Even if evolution is wrong, it's still a part of the idea of evolution. In fact, the thing that Darwin is most famous for isn't actually universal common descent, right? That was an idea other people had had. It was because he gave a mechanism that could explain how evolutionary change happened in cases that were at least non-neutral, right? So there are some things that are relatively neutral, like you have a chin if you're a human. It doesn't matter all that much. It's not terribly important to your life that you have a chin. So you could say that's neutral. Now, it's a little bit more complicated to that because it's actually linked to other genes that are important, but we're not going to get into that, right? Or like the exact proportion between like your pinky and your ring finger. That varies in humans without any obvious change to like survivability, reproductive output, or quality of life or anything like that, right? Like you might have a slightly longer pinky compared to your ring finger to someone else, and it makes no difference, right? So apart from things like that that are probably neutral, natural selection was a big way in which we could explain how it came about. There was things like faunal succession. That's what Darwin was most famous for. So anyway, we'll hit play now that I'm not done ranting. I'm just going to stop ranting.
Become resistant to pesticides. You spray pesticides on a bunch of roaches and 99.99% of them die.
It's going to be less than that, but okay. Or actually, in some cases, it's going to be more than that. Sometimes you can't get all of them, but sure, whatever.
Well, the 0.01% that lives is going to then produce the next generation of roaches, obviously.
Yeah. Kent is giving a pretty good description of the basic idea of natural selection. We'll take a drink for that. Lillipunk, the ape istivist member for 5 months and is at the amnio level, says, PSA, if you have a pet you no longer want, even if it's a fish or reptile, contact a shelter in your area. Don't spread invasive species. Drink. Yes, please. Do not release your pets into the wild. It is a really bad idea. Look, I'm a firm believer that you shouldn't get a pet unless you are very confident that you can take care of it for its entire natural life, which means that you should check the natural lifespan of a pet before you buy it, and if it's considerably longer than you can expect to live, you shouldn't get it. If you're 50, don't buy a parrot unless it's already an old parrot. Just don't do it. Don't get a tortoise if you're 60, even if it's a small tortoise. It's a fair chance you're going to die before that, and you're going to have to shove it onto someone else who did not agree to have it. Further, if you, in fact, cannot take care of a pet, that is an abdication of your responsibility that you took on in taking that animal in. You need to be very confident if you have a pet that you can afford to and have the physical ability, as best as you can predict, to take care of that pet, meet all of its needs for its lifespan. Period. Okay. If you can't, and that happens sometimes, and that's okay, right? Sometimes, you lose a job, you have a horrible injury, you get some kind of chronic condition that you didn't know was going to happen, and now you can't take care of your pet. It's tragic, but it happens, and I'm not saying that if you had to give up a pet for a reason like that, that makes you a bad person or something. But if you do need to give up a pet, please either directly find someone who can take it in or bring it to a shelter. And if you find someone who can directly bring it in, try to make sure that they are willing to take care of it for the rest of its remaining natural life. Right? So if you're giving up a dog that probably has 5 or 6 good years of life left, make sure you give it to someone who you can be very confident can take care of it for 5 or 6 years. On the other hand, if you're trying to give up a parrot that's 20 years old and it's probably got another 40 to go, try to make sure you find someone who can take care of a bird for 40 years. That's a big commitment. Also, parrots are not... people shouldn't keep parrots as pets. Now, I'm excluding smaller parrots that don't live that long, like parakeets. Don't get an African gray. Don't get a macaw. They live too long for you to actually be able to make that commitment reasonably. And they can't contribute for the most part, right? So it's not like they can help you out with that. So if you currently have a parrot, do your best. Anyway, here we go.
And now, out of those kids, maybe half of them die from the pesticide because half of them inherited a resistance. Okay, that happens. And then eventually you can get a whole population of roaches that are resistant to a particular pesticide. Mm-hmm. Okay. It's still a roach.
Yay for monophyly. You're right, Ken. It is still a roach. It's like that's the whole point of evolution. Things can't escape their ancestry. They can only evolve based on what their ancestry has. It's always going to be an insect. It's always going to be an animal. It's always going to be a eukaryote. You're right, Ken. You got it. Now you just have to kind of stop lying about it. Here we go.
And the variation, the information for the variation was already in the gene pool.
Yes, that is how natural selection works. But the question is, where do the variations come from, Kent? Because we have too many variations in every population to be explained by the Noah's Ark story. Especially if you do want to say that the only variation that can be there is the one that was contained in the actual animals that survived the flood. Right? Like if you had 2 pairs of dogs, that's 4 alleles, period, for any locus in the entire canid genome, taken as a whole, all species of canines, right? The dhole, the fennec fox, the red fox, the African painted dog, the golden jackal, the Eurasian jackal, which turns out is not the same species as the golden jackal, they checked. The red fox, the gray fox, the coyote, the crab-eating fox, which isn't even a fox, the pampas fox, which again, isn't even a fox, the maned wolf, which again, not a wolf. All of the short-eared dog. which again, not really a dog. Those are all South American canids, none of which are dogs or wolves or foxes. It's the whole thing. Yeah, all of the and more. There's more. The tanuki or the raccoon dog, which isn't a raccoon and also isn't a dog in the strict sense, but it is a tanuki, which famously have gigantic gonads in the males, famously exaggerated in many Japanese statues of really big sacks hanging off of raccoon dogs. Fun facts with Dapper. I don't know. They've got more than 4 alleles per locus among all of these species. Goodness. Okay.
See, roaches might become resistant to pesticides, but they never become resistant to a sledgehammer.
Again, Kent, we're talking about physical limits to biology. That's not the same thing as limits to genome variation, which is what we're talking about when we talk about evolution. Evolution is about changes in allele frequencies in a population over time. Now, Bent, is an allele a physical strength of structures, or is it a thing in the genome?
It's in the genome.
Okay, so if we talk about sledgehammers with regards to evolution, are we fundamentally misunderstanding it? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not that hard to understand. This is not super complicated science. I mean, it is when you get into it, but like the misunderstanding here is on a very basic level. That's what I mean. I'm not saying that genetics and evolutionary biology isn't complex science. It is. But the level of misunderstanding here is on a level that I would be surprised if like a 12-year-old had after having evolution explained.
There's a limit to the resistance. And they produce the same kind of plant or animal. Variations are still the same kind. When you get into a discussion on evolution, I recommend you don't use the word species. Stick with the word kind.
Why? Because there's no definition for kind, so you can use whatever kind of equivocation comes up that's handy for you. You just hand wave anything away. Yeah. I mean, I understand why he recommends that. Oh, Maya wants a gift sub specifically from Dr. Tapioca Weasel. Dr. Tapioca Weasel, are you going to step up so Maya Atkinson has a membership? She wants all those wonderful emojis. The only solution is that you gift 50 subs right now. It's the only way it'll work. I'm kidding.
That would probably do it.
It would probably do it. That's fair. It's not the only way it would work, though. You could also just give one sub at a time until Maya gets one. I'm pretty sure she chats often enough that she would probably be high up on the list.
The biblical kind were those that originally were able to reproduce.
Oh, originally able to reproduce. Okay. How are you going to test that, Kent?
Test it.
I don't know.
Not without a time machine.
Not without a time machine. Because the thing is, not all of the things that people typically think of as kinds, like the canids or the deer or whatever, can all reproduce together.
And produce a viable offspring. At the one of the aquariums, they have the...
Now, viable offspring is a curious thing, right? What does it mean to be viable? So, like, let's say that we have 2 organisms that can reproduce, and each parent has a lifespan of, say, 20 years. But hybrids have a lifespan of 15 years. Is that viable? I don't know. What if the hybrids only have a lifespan of 10 years? I don't know. What if the lifespan is only a few days, and one organism has a lifespan of maybe a couple years, and the other one has a lifespan of like 80-ish years? I don't know. Is that viable? And here's that reason I ask. People produce hamster-human hybrids. It's a fertility check for male fertility, where they remove the zona pellucida from a hamster egg and see if their spermatozoa from a male human can fertilize the egg. And when it does, it undergoes several rounds of cell division. That is a human hamster hybrid. It's viable for a little bit. Does that mean that humans and hamsters are in the same kind? I don't know. Because this definition doesn't make any sense. Now, we have a few things here. First, Gupdu3 says for $5, Tanukis also famously put you to work at their store so you can pay a house loan you took out from them. Yes. Now, Dr. Tapioca Weasel has attempted to gift 3 individual memberships. One went to Alex Markle. The next went to April Van Ryn, and then the next went to Vesta Freya. None of them are Maya Atkinson. And then DM Wing. So first, let's take those 3 drinks. Here we go. 1, 2, and 3. And then, of course, DM Wing gifted 5 more memberships, and they went to Joshua Gies, Jesse Van Spiker Milet. Again, I'm sorry for butchering your name. If you give me an IPA pronunciation guide, I'm sure I will get it at least almost completely right. Maya Atkinson, there you go. You got it from DM Wing.
Got it.
Ian Debunked and Cindy Bidwell Glaze. There we go. And also, Regios gifted 5 memberships. So let's first take the 5 for DM Wing. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then the 5 from Regios went to cross-platform adventures. There we go. Dragon Spartan 90 official, The Fallen, Christopher Kennedy Theist, Trippy Liquids, and I think that was it. So 5 more. Here we go. And then we're going to wrap it up for today. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Well, it looks like no Tutu, not too far off, but also, hey, I have a new graphics card driver available. That's pretty important.
Nice.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I appreciate all the support. It's really important to me. It is how I can call this my job, which is still weird to me. You should hear my dad try to understand how I get paid and what I do for a living. He's like, okay, so hold on, you do what? And like, I tell him and he's like, I don't, okay. And people like, there's money? Like, yeah. Mm-hmm. He's like, you say so. I'm like, okay, cool. He just doesn't get it. It's great. So yeah, it's weird to me. It's weird to my parents, whatever. But yeah, it's not almost entirely. It's entirely because of you guys, right? Without you guys, there would be no money coming in, even from ads. So I want to say thank you so much for all your generosity, for all your support, for just being here. I mean, hey, we had over 10 dozen people here today at maximum. So that's great. And I want to say that we got some stuff coming up this next week, but first I'm going to turn to Bent. Bent, do you have anything you want to tell people about? I
want to specifically mention Power Rangers Jungle Beasts tomorrow night on Top Hats Off.
Same time. Actually,
be there or be square.
I have to double check. It might end up being at 7-hour time because I don't know that I want to change the time for everyone else. Would you be okay with that, Bent?
Yes.
Okay. It might actually be an hour later than this, but at the normal time that we normally do it for most people, which is 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern. Actually, that's what I'm going to do for that show because out of the 7 people there, only 2 of us are in an area that don't change clocks. So anyway, yeah, that's going to be on Top Hats Off. That's my other channel. There's it's mostly RPG Let's Play live streams, but there's also other stuff, like it's where I dump test animations. There's a few Blender tutorials on there, stuff like that. All right, let's see what's coming up. So on Thursday, that video that I mentioned, or sorry, not the video I mentioned, Incoherent Rambling, Doug's Amazing Fabrications, part 1 of 3 is coming out. That is with Doug Batchelor. He is a Seventh-day Adventist kook, who not only has some interesting takes on evolution, which are different from the standard creationists in some ways, but he also has some weird takes on Christian theology, most of which are just from being a Seventh-day Adventist, which is a weird section of Christianity compared to other parts of Christianity. That's going to be on Thursday at 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. That's a premiere. On Saturday at the same time, 11 Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern, we should be having the next Gish with Vishanti, my regular Saturday co-host, who I believe will be wearing an interesting item because you guys met a funding goal for that. So it won't be a tutu, but I also think it won't be feathers. That's assuming, of course, that she's feeling okay, because every once in a while she's not feeling too good, and doesn't come on camera, and that's understandable. And then next week should be Matt with Maddie. I have asked Maddie if she is good, but she has not gotten back to me. But then again, I only asked like 3 hours ago, so being a new mom who's trying to work on her PhD, she's a pretty busy person. Although, how long do you say people are a new mom for? Like, because I think her daughter's over a year old now. Like, what counts as new? I don't know. It's probably arbitrary. But yeah, that covers us up to a week from now. If you are a member or a patron, please make sure you go to Discord. Go to your settings. There's a section called Connections. Add the account from which you have a membership, or add your Patreon account. You will automatically be added to the Discord server. If that doesn't work, restart Discord completely and try it again. That worked for the last person who had that problem. And if you are a member of the Discord, we're going to be heading over to watch some Power Rangers in the next few minutes. So feel free to check that out if you're in the Discord. With that, everybody, thank you so much. I hope to see all of you on Thursday. And yeah, we're out of here.
Bye.
Hey, before you leave, I just want to take a second to thank my patrons and channel members, especially those pledging $20 or above. Benthoven, Phil Rivara, Tapioca Weasel, Whispers, Denny5252, Ellerhan Teller, Ian Chen, Kelvin Brostick Van Manen, Landon Knoll, Mabbity Babbity, Monkey They Them, Sphincter of Doom, Ita V, Strawberry Vein, and Star Runner. It's because of my channel members and patrons whom you're seeing on screen that this channel can stay afloat. Without you, it would all shut down. If you want to join the team, there's a link to join the channel below this video, and there's a link to join the Patreon in the description. On the Patreon, you can get a 10% discount for pledging annually, and either way, you get early access to virtually all of my scripted videos, often 3 to 5 months before they come out for the general public. Thanks for watching.